So we're going to look at pre-flighting both in InDesign and in a PDF file. And the way we're going to go about this, on the server, you're going to see a folder in the share folder called Preflight Exercise 1. I'm going to be working through those files right now. I would suggest that you have this video on one screen, your other screen, have those files, and kind of move through it as we go. Our objective is the following week to give you a new set of files that you're then going to pre-flight. So this is going to be our introduction into pre-flighting. So the first thing I'm going to do is open my PDF here and get rid of some of that stuff. So here's a supplied PDF. We want to start from that PDF. Generally, if you're pre-flighting something, you're at a print facility, you've received some kind of PDF from your client, and we need to first see what's going on, what's good about this file, what needs to be changed. So we want to start and really just kind of start with a little bit of a visual check and look at a few things. The first thing is making sure that bleed is going to be filled. So right now I'm just kind of looking at my crop marks, and if I go down, it looks like bleed's filled the whole way. Maybe even another way I could do that is by clicking on this little area. And again, I'm in my print production tab here. If we go to page boxes, we can even check the trim size of this document. So there's our trim size, 8.5 by 11. That makes sense. That gives me that green line there, and I can see that bleed's filled, right? If there was no image on this side, well, then I'm missing bleed. So go through, do my visual check. My trim size looks good. My bleed looks filled. Kind of just a visual check and see if there's anything sitting too close to trim. That can be a little tricky to tell in Acrobat. What I'm going to do to help myself along is hit Command R. So now I have my rulers. Probably lives under view somewhere. If I pull some rules here, that might help out a little bit too. Right, so there's my trim then, and then I can see approximately how much space I have there. Not like the best way to do it, so I'm looking, well, maybe I've got a 1/4 inch or so violation there. That's a lot easier to do in InDesign, really, but we do have that option that we can kind of pull some guides and just see what's going on. We also want to see what's going on with our overprints. That's going to be helpful. When we tell Acrobat to pre-flight this for us, it's going to give us some errors, but it's not going to catch everything for us. A lot of it it's going to. So we really want to go to our output preview right now. And I'm going to start by toggling my black channel. And just from kind of looking at it, well, I know that this probably isn't the best way to have it set up. Same with my logo here. Notice this one disappears, but that one doesn't at the bottom. So there's just some variation between blacks there. And if I zoom in a little bit, maybe I have some weird issues happening with my overprint there. So there's a few things that I want to be thinking about. I also want to think about my total area coverage. If we turn that on down here and set it for 300, which is our norm, generally our norm for commercial printing, you can see there's some things up here that dance around and go up to 302. That's not a big deal. This whole box is up at 400, so that again tells us some information about what kind of black is being used there. This is also a time to talk about spot colors. Should it have a spot color? If it does, it needs to be listed here. If not, well, then we should only have those 4 colors here. So those are some general things that I'll go through and talk about, and in lieu of actually editing it together, here's just a real quick list if you want to screenshot some of the stuff that we went through as far as our visual check. So that's part of what we're able to do, and that's a good start. But we also want to talk about how we can automate that process a little bit as well. So you can see we have an option here for pre-flight. Let me go ahead and select that. And that's going to bring up my pre-flight panel here. Real quick, there's just some neat things in here as far as like fix-ups. Let's say I needed to convert all those fonts to an outline, so I could open this PDF in Acrobat. I'm able to do that here, or convert everything to CMYK. Just some nice tools in here. And then there's some options as far as Preflight and what we want it to do. There's our PDF X1A. It'll tell me if it's an X1A. If it's not, actually, this will convert it to an X1A for me. That's all fine and good. What I want to look at, though, is a Preflight profile that's designed just for us in this course. So we're just going to go to options here, and for fun and games, let's look at create a profile. When we do that, we can see that we can go into this profile and page. So we could Preflight as far as how many pages there should be or what the size should be. Resolution, right? If it's too high or too low. Colors, if it has more than several spot colors, right? So we can go through some of those fixes. If we go under here, what kind of PDF we want, and then a lot of like fix up, and let's actually come here. What is our custom checks? We can set a Preflight to go through and look for all of these individual pieces. If there's a black line less than 2 points for our white vector object is not set to knockout, meaning that it's overprinting. Resolution of bitmaps, fonts not being embedded. So a PDF is going to look for a massive amount of information, which is just incredibly helpful for us. I'm going to cancel that. Just wanted to show that to you that exists. Cancel, yes, sweet. We've already gone through and built one for you. So we're going to look for import profile. And we actually need to navigate to the print shop server. Yeah, sorry, I just had to connect to that quick. So I'm on the print shop server. We're going to go into whatever class we're talking about here, class of 2020 right now. Shared folder, and we should find, with any amount of luck, this KFP file. So that KFP file is going to be the custom Preflight that we're after. So we're going to go ahead and hit open. We have a new option here, imported profiles, Stevens _v4. That's the profile that we're going to use for these assignments, and also use moving forward whenever we're submitting files for projects for grading. We want to go through and start getting in the habit of Preflighting our files to make sure that we're providing good information. So to run this, we're going to hit analyze, or we could just double click on it, and it's going to go through and start telling me some information. And really it's just a matter of sitting down slowly and kind of walking through this and seeing what each one says. So the first one says PDF document is not compliant with PDF X1A. So again, the idea behind PDF X1A is it sets some standards for the printing industry that if a PDF is an X1A, the following are true about it. So this one is just saying that it's not an X1A. And because it's not an X1A, it's giving me all these additional errors. I don't necessarily care about these additional errors. I can even close this up. Really, it's just saying, hey, this file is not an X1A, and we'll go through and we'll look at why that's an issue. I don't really how to fix it. So if we go down to the next one, color element is set to overprint. So again, if we just read that headline, it tells us what that issue is. And we've talked about, well, if a color element is set to overprint, it's going to change the color of something. If I bring back my overprint preview here and turn off my simulate overprint, you can see how this apply now is dancing around a little bit. But we can use our Preflight here to really look at where that's happening, right? So it tells me the error, it tells me why that's an error, but if I drop down, it's going to give me a little bit more information. That if I double click on it, you can see that it's now highlighted that for me. I could even hit show, that would highlight it, or this show in snap view, and it'll pop open this little box and say that's your issue. So it's apply, and now, okay, so that's one of my issues. I'll close that up. Next issue, 100% black filled object set to knockout. There's my explanation of what that means. Again, the drop down, if I start clicking on that, or double click on it, and it'll highlight it for me. So it's saying all of this is set to knockout, which we noticed from when we were doing our visual check here. And then the last one, it's going to tell me is registration color inside trim box, right? So if we click on that, well, there's my big rectangle, and there it is. And we kind of saw that as well when we put our tack on. We saw that that's getting highlighted up there. We were okay with it. But even if we hover down here, you can see in my overprint preview that that's at 100% for all 4 channels, up to 400%, which just isn't going to work for us. So that gave us a list of things that are wrong with this PDF that we need to fix. So depending on our workflow, it might be a matter of using a plugin called InFocus Pit Stop that's going to allow you to edit this PDF right in Acrobat and probably take care of the majority of these things. But before we kind of get into that, I'd really rather us just go back to the native document and really look at what's going on and try and figure out some of this stuff. So I'm going to close out this PDF. Maybe I made a note of all the errors that came up. And I'm going to go back to my folder here, and I'm going to get the actual PDF file, or I'm sorry, the InDesign file open. I'm going to hit W here so I can see my bleed, right? So we talked about some safety issues before. That's kind of hard to see. If this was a true half-inch safety, which would be pretty aggressive, that would be an issue. All right, you either need to scale that down, and that's something you'd have to talk to your client about, make sure that they're cool with that, or bump that in. For right now, I'm just going to let that go. Same thing up here. That's something that you'd really want to talk to your client about and maybe try and move that within safety. Those little descenders I wouldn't be too concerned about. But let's go through and start fixing our problems. So we had a lot of overprint problems. So I think what we'll do is just bring up our output preview in InDesign so we can see it and see what that looks like as we go through. So we're looking under output, and I always forget where this is. There we go, right below it. Separation preview, popping up on the screen. There we go. And we're just going to turn that separation preview on. So let's just start at the top here. This is knocking out. We could, a few options to get this rectified. We could go to Windows. We could look at output and attributes, right? And we could maybe go ahead and grab all this and set to overprint fill, right? That would be one way to, similar like we're used to doing in Illustrator, and that took care of it. That's good. That's great. That's one way to do it. But another thought, just to kind of recap, if I grab that and go over to my swatches and choose my type, we can now see why that black was set to knockout, because it's the black copy. So it's just 0, 0, 0, 100, but it doesn't have that property of the black bracketed. Or if I just take black bracketed, that will default to overprint. That'll default to overprint. So even if I grab all this and I turn this off now, that's still going to overprint. So 6 to 1, half dozen to another. Doesn't necessarily matter how we're getting there, just as long as that's overprinting. That's great. That's great. So we have some issue here. We don't love how that's overprinting, and then we can see that color shift in it. It's going to be even more pronounced when it's printed out. We've got a few options there. So kind of the opposite of what just happened. On this side, we are using our bracketed black, which means it's going to default to overprint. So there's not a way to knock this out. One option is I have my black copy there. I made that just by pulling this down, right? And set it to black 2. And when I do our black, like that's in good shape. That looks good. That's one option. We could open this up and maybe we want to make it a just rich black, so we could do 60, 40, 40, 100. That's another viable option and gives us some depth to that color. If we look at that type size, that's 30 point. That's going to be plenty large enough to hold that dropout type on that rich black tint panel. Right, so there's two of our issues so far. We weren't real happy with this apply now, right? That's supposed to be cyan. So if we go back to separation and we look at that, now that's actually a file, right? Just by how I'm clicking on it, I can't get to the type. So if we just pop over to our links and we can see, well, there's an apply now. This little guy is going to either edit original or go to link. Let's just hit that button. Pull Illustrator over here. Lovely. And same thing, like I always want to track my overprint throughout the process just to see what it's doing. So let's just go back up to Windows, separation preview, they call it now. Turn that on, and hey, there's my issue. So we know that the relationship between overprint and knockout, it's got to be doing one of those. And if it's not doing one, it's doing the other. So this is overprinting. That's my issue. I need it to do the other. I need it to knock out. So I'm going to go to Windows and look at attributes again. There we go. You can see overprint fill is checked on. So we're just going to turn that off, and we've fixed that now. Lovely. So we'll save that, close it, get out of Illustrator, come back over here. That updated my link for me. Lovely. As I move down, kind of same deal here. We noticed that it's a link. That logo.psd is a giveaway also. We're just going to do the same thing and edit that one. Sorry, Photoshop's going to launch here. Lovely. And when we get that launched, we know that Illustrator and InDesign, they're brother and sister. They work really similarly. Photoshop is going to be the cousin there. So we're not going to go to Windows and attributes. We're not going to find that. We've really just got to work with our channels or our layers, however this is set up. So this is still set up with layers, so that works really well. We're just going to grab this layer and change it to multiply, right? And now if we go to our channels, we can see that we've got that overprinting now also. So we'll save that, close it, pop back over to InDesign. That automatically updated it for me. We're going to go ahead and turn that off and on. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. That's looking good. The last issue we had was this, set to registration. So my only thought here would be to match whatever I've done up top. If I take this and set it just to my black overprint, turn off my black, well now you can see I'm going to overprint this image and not that side, so that's going to make another awkward break. We would have the option of making it our black copy, right? That's going to be key only, but knock out, right? But if we've made the top one registration, if we've made the top one rich black, we want to match that to the bottom. We don't want two different tones to it, right? So I think we went through and taken care of the majority of our issues. Something else that's just beneficial as we're pre-flighting, it's nice to do some pre-flighting like as you're working in InDesign. So if you look down here, right now it has a little green dot. It says no errors. If I click on that, I can do pre-flight panel. And you can see in that pre-flight panel that it's just set to a basic or a working pre-flight. If we hit the drop down and look at what's in here, pre-flight options, define a profile, we can go through and make a profile for ourselves, right? So this is kind of our basic one. I'm just going to hit new here and just put my name in it, right? So anytime a link is missing or needs updated, that's going to yell at me. If I come down here, well, let me make that bigger. If I don't want spot colors in it, right? I can have it yell at me. If there's overprinting applied in InDesign, I can just have that warn me. If there's registration applied, if it's overprinting white, let's see what it has for images. Oh man, non-proportional scaling. Like if you accidentally stretch something, it'll yell at you. Minimum stroke widths. right? A lot of things that if you build it into your PDF, Acrobat's going to yell at you. But if you take a step back and go and set this up for yourself, that's going to help a ton. Bleed, right? Some text images there. If there's oversized text, that one's by default. That's important. This is great. Dynamic spelling. Dynamic spelling is like the little red wavy line, like if you're in Word or something. You can go to edit spelling and then choose dynamic spelling so that's on. But if that's on, it's going to warn you if you have something spelled wrong. Like, that's beautiful. Non-proportional type scaling, we talk about, we never want to do that. Minimum type sizes, you can go in and set that. Document, this one's quasi useful. Page size and orientation. If you know that page size should be 8.5 by 11, that might be really useful for our purposes in our coursework. That's always moving around, so probably not super beneficial. I'm just going to hit save here for fun and games and hit OK, and then change this to Brady, right? And it goes through and says, okay, you have one error, text, dynamic spelling problem. Beautiful. Like, that's great. So we can be working on this stuff as we're going, that we don't get any of these surprises at the end. That's something I'd really recommend. Just sitting down, taking your time, walking through those things. It's a great exercise to rehash some of the things we've been talking about and put it into practice. So a while ago, we also talked about PostScript and PDF when we talked about X1As and our page description language, all those fun things. To kind of bring that topic back up, we actually want to take this and turn it into a PostScript document. So we're going to go to File and Print, similar like when we were making a PostScript for the plate maker last year. You can see that the printer is going to be the printer is going to be PostScript file, the PPD, the PostScript printer description, which is the set of options for that printer, is going to be set to Adobe PDF 9. If we click on setup, we want it to be custom, and when we deliver something to somebody else, we generally want crop marks. We want to be able to communicate with that person, say like, well, this is a bleed and this is where I want it to bleed. Generally, we just want crop marks. I know that's different from what we've talked about. If we're delivering files to Presswise for us to impose, then we don't want any. But generally, if you're giving files to me for submission for grading or going to a printer, like, we want to start following this workflow. So what we'll do is always write it custom and always write it at trim plus an inch. So if I click on this little P here, it's going to tell me what my page size is, and my page size now is 8.5 by 11. I've just set this to 9.5 by 12, so that gives me my trim size plus an additional inch. Under marks and bleed, I have my crop marks and then my offset. Offset's generally going to default to like a 16th or so, and the issue with that is those crop marks are going to be inside of your bleed, where depending on how that trims, they might be visible. Best practice, and what we need to get in the habit of doing, is changing our offset and pushing it to something above our bleed. So if we do 3/16, that keeps all of our marks out of our bleed. Make sure that we're doing our bleed down here, right? Under output, generally we want things composite. A nice little trick though, if you are in the habit of designing with a lot of PMS colors, and a lot of people are, I do it myself, but you need to deliver a 4-color file, you can go into this ink manager here, and I don't have any process colors, but if I did, I could choose this all spot to process. That would break it for me all to 4-color, but not edit my original file. So that's a nice little tool as well. Graphics, send data. We want to send all data. If we do optimized subsampling, InDesign's going to make a few decisions for us, and that's not necessarily what we want. So we want it all. Fonts downloaded complete. We want that entire set moving across. Color management, nothing to worry about here, but there are some good tools here moving forward we can talk about. And then the last thing that we would really care about is our transparency flattener. Keep in mind, transparency flattener means anywhere there's going to be transparency, one object with an opacity that's reduced on top of another object, it's going to get flattened or pushed into one element through this process. it's going to try and keep it vector, but if it can't, it's going to go raster. And if it's going to go raster, we want it to be high resolution, which will make all that flattening at 300 ppi. If I were you, I would go to printer preset, and nope, don't do that. Never mind. I would come down here to save preset and just call this X1A, right? So now anytime you're making a file for me and I'm asking for an X1A file, you just need to come up here, select your X1A, and the only thing that's going to change is your setup, right? The idea of your trim, your page size, plus an inch. That's the only thing you're going to have to touch. So I'd recommend doing that. Otherwise, you're going to have to go through, bring this video back up. If you go to the shared folder, there's a process sheets folder, and in there are some more instructions on putting this together. But that's what we need to focus on. I'm going to hit save here, and I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Wonderful. We're going to save this. Now let's just minimize this, get out of the way right now, get out of the way. And our next step is bringing up distiller. So we just made a PostScript. That doesn't do a ton for me right now. We're not able to do much with that. If I try and double click it, it's really going to open in distiller here, or if your machine's not configured correctly, it's going to open it in preview, which is going to make all kind of issues for you. So we need to distill this, and really what I recommend doing is just taking it and dropping it right on there. You can see it's asking me if I'm sure I am. It's going to go through and chug along there, but it really matters what's selected up here. What's selected up here. This is our go-to. PDF X1A 2001. That's when our standard was made. So that's the one that we want to do. Again, if we take that before it's on the Japanese version of it, I'm sure, and wherever your PostScript lives, it's going to throw your PDF back in the same spot. So if I look on my desktop and bring that over here, I can open up that PDF file. So this is the PDF that I just made, right? If I hover down the bottom left corner, there's that 9.5 by 12 that we set. You can see that my marks are outside of my bleed. That looks good. This is what your PDFs need to look like as far as submission to me, with almost that 1/2 inch of white around it with just our crop marks. That's what we're looking for. So again, if we go back into print production and our pre-flight, let's hit our standard V4, and we get this lovely little green check mark, no problems found. That's wonderful, but that's not always the end all, right? I could have gotten no problems found, but this black bar could still be overprinting, this could still be overprinting, key only, and I would be able to see that. So although this is a great indication, we've got to make sure that we're doing some critical thinking as well and say, okay, what's telling me it's good, but is it? Conversely, if I would have made these 0, 0, 0, 100, made them key only and knock out, this would be yelling at me right now. But again, I wouldn't be concerned about that because I made it that way for a specific reason. So as we go through and do grading, this is part of the process that we're going to be engaging with, something I'll be doing. I'll be running this pre-flight on everybody's files, and I don't look for just the green or the red if there's issues or something. If it makes sense, like, that's cool. So don't get too hung up on that. If you have a red like X here, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that you need to be mindful of. So you can see just by taking that PostScript and distilling it that specific way, it got rid of that, hey, your PDF's not an X1A. Let's get rid of that for a second. If we just choose, let's just say standard here. If I have the wrong setting here, I am sure it's going to go through and distill that for me again. It's thinking, right, there's my new file. It just replaced my old one. Everything looks good there, right? We have everything. That makes sense. But if I distill this now, I've got some issues, right? That it's not an X1A. So we can really run into some issues just by not getting this distiller section down. So just be mindful of that. Make sure that you're going to X1A, drop it in there. Go ahead, run through that again. And then this should be your final PDF, right? We give it that final check. And then we'd pre-flight it, right? No problems found. Or if there's a problem found, we are aware of it, we know about it, and we're in good shape with it. So that's our pre-flighting process, right? Being able to take our file, bring it into Acrobat, pre-flight it, see what kind of issues we have, go back into the natives, fix that document until we get it back to this setting. So if you haven't already, go through, take these files, follow along and get your PDF back into good shape. Next week, I'm going to be giving you a similar piece here with a bunch of goofy little things wrong that you're going to spend some time going through to pre-flight on your own. And lastly, this is now our standard operating procedure for when you are making files to submit to me. Going through making it an X1A, making it a PostScript, distilling that to an X1A, pre-flighting it, any issues, we're heading off. Last thing, sometimes it's gonna flag something that's just not an issue, or you're just not concerned with it. Maybe you took your black type and it's Helvetica, so it has a large X height, so you can set it at 5 point in one color, and it's your copyright line. You're not super worried about it. Acrobat's going to pre-flight that, and it's going to yell at you and say it's too small. Again, if you're saying like, hey, chill out, I know this, or even from doing some flattening, previewing, the transparency flattening, sorry, like that might give you some weird things too. Just look at it and think logically, is this an issue? Is it not? And again, you can always let me know. As always, if there's any questions, please let me know. Thank you.